Okay, Jose Luis Flores, consider it done. Okay, hi YouTubers. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about what things looked like in the 70s and the 80s. Well, like basically 70s and 80s. So, I mean, it's like if I can remember life in the 70s and 80s, well, especially the 70s, you know, the quick and easy way I can give you a little story about this, I'm just gonna show you some pics. Just gonna show you some pictures, and I'm gonna talk about them. So, this is random pictures from the 80s and 70s, and I'm just gonna talk about every one of these. Well, most of this is, I guess, is gonna be from the 70s. So, anyway, first off, this is Arnold and Hector, like back in the day. This was like, I think 1980, I think. This was Hector and Arnold, and they're getting ready to take a trip on an airplane to Mexico. This was 1980, like during the last of the days of moving out of the house. And then this day right here, this was like mid-70s when we got this dog. We named him Kaiser, you know, back in the day. But the dog was a lazy dog and he ran away. I mean, he ran away later on. And this was my mom and Cynthia. I mean, this was, I believe, 1982. And this is us. Well, I think this was like my grandma, my aunt, and my mom, and there's me right there. So, and Jose, you know, torpedo, you might say. So I remember back in our days, you know, like our leisure time was going to the parks. We loved going to the parks. I mean, it was actually very common to go to parks during the 80s and 70s for fun, and we would always play our sports, you know. Like we would, well, like either sports or we would just play. I mean, we would play on those machines or those little swings things, you know, like the spin around, the little carousel that spins around that we got dizzy on. We used to do that, you know. Back in the day, we did that. And then, this was hanging out at our house, at the house, the very first house that you saw, like on my very first videos, 1988. This is the house, the 1634 one Edna played, but this was like 1982. So, I mean, in our times, me and Jose, we loved to just play in the backyard, you know. We did a lot of that back in the day. And then this day, this was Christmas 1983, and that was me right there. As you could see, I was 13 at the time. This is another picture of us, and then this time me is included in there. This is 1980 at that house in Santa Ana. This one is at 3102 South Townsend Street, Santa Ana. Love that house. I loved being there, but we moved, you know. This was the Covina house, the 1634 one Edna place. So, I mean, I actually climbed up on the roof and I took pictures of Hector and Arnold playing baseball, playing catch, Hector was really into that stuff, playing baseball, We did a lot of that back in the day, and I mean, Hector, like, this is like the kind of things that we did a lot of back then, hanging out in the backyard or playing catch or just playing in the backyard. I miss those days, I miss those days when we used to do that. We used to just play around in the backyard, And then over here, this is like, I think, 1979. This is me right there. Raymond, Arnold, and Hector. We had just came back from a park. And like, like we did a lot of parks. And we used to ride bikes a lot. Or we used to just play sports. That's what we used to do a lot of back then, There's my mom, and at the same house, the Covina house. This was before the renovation back in the day. And you could see the date right there, 1982. So, like I say, this was me. I was actually kind of tired from after playing the games or something. We running around and stuff. We used to do a lot of that in the parks, Well, we went to parks a lot, my aunts and uncles and us. We used to bring our food, or we used to always like to hang out at parks. And look at this Alpha Beta bag. So I was like sweaty from running around a lot that time, That was, I don't know what park this is, but I think this was in the Covina area. And this is another thing we used to do. Like Cynthia. This was Cynthia. This was like around 1983, I believe. Cynthia was 3 and I was 13, and I would just be playing around, and I would just be, like we would just play games, or we would just hang out in the rooms and play around. Everybody would be in the room, and we used to just like to play around, like in the nights, like. And this was me. This was 1981. Me with the tape recorder. Well, for me, that was like the start of the tape recorder days, or cassettes. That was my MP3 player right there. But if I didn't have this tape recorder, I would just be playing with my toys, or I would just be outside. But I think I was doing a lot of going outside a lot. This was us, Hector, Arnold, Hector, and me in that same room. Well, we used to hang out in the same room. We used to just do a lot of games, or we used to just hang out, And then this was 1982, going into that house again, that 1634 1 Edna place. We used to just like to be in the backyard. We did a lot of that back in the day, Play games and stuff. It's Christmas, I think 1982. And this was a visit at Disneyland, and that's me right there. 1984. And Cynthia and Jose. I had my day there. And there's just another day of hanging out in our room. Me and Arnold, this was me and Arnold's room, and Hector had his own room. So back in the day, like when we didn't have anything else to do, we would just play games, board games, or we would just draw, or we would just find something to do. We didn't have any TVs or anything in the room, but. So if I can remember our days, like whenever we were home, we would just draw, or we would just play with the toys. We would just basically play with our toys, like Legos, or play with our toys. That's what we used to do. This was 1981, I believe. 1981, or I don't know if this was late 70s or early 80s. I think this was more like 1979. I think it was 79, not 1981. I think it was 79 or 1980 maybe. And then you could see that I was having my operations on my ears, like my ear, to try to fix it, to make it look better. but never succeeded. But this was mine and Arnold's room when my dad had made the addition in the house back in the time. And this is the same room there. So you can see the little calendar, a custom-made calendar. You know, like it was like a dot metrics thing, you know, back in the 70s. I think this was 1979. So, look at the Firefox toy. It's like a Jeep type. And then this is my picture. I actually had a little project in school to write to anybody we want, and I wrote to Jimmy Carter, the president at the time, and I had asked him to send me a picture of him, and apparently he did. Well, I don't know who actually does it, but anyway, there's more of hanging out in the backyard. You know, like we did a lot of that in the 80s. This was like 1982. We did a lot of games. We played a lot of games like catch or just games, tag, or in the backyard of our house. This is the 1634 1 Edna Place Street. Another shot of Hector and Arnold playing baseball or a little catch in the backyard, and I was up on the roof taking pictures with that camera. And this is what birthday parties looked like back in the day. This was like probably 82, 83. I think it was 82. Well, this was like another day of hanging out. Like, we would just climb up trees, and yeah, I tell you, I remember that. I miss those kind of days. I miss these days when we used to all just go out in the backyard and just enjoy ourselves, you know. I miss those days, you know. More parks, you know, when all of us used to get together and we'd go to parks and just hang out there and play games, you know. And Christmas, this was Christmas of 1979. I loved that Christmas. That year, that was a great Christmas for me, you know. And then this is one of the toys that I got for Christmas. This is my Lego. I was so happy with this Christmas that year. Then for Christmas, I got this. I don't know what they call this. I think it's called Oxygon, or I don't know. I mean, it was like this interlocking type toys. I think that was 1979. I had got the light bright. You could see that. And I liked this toy, but I had a complaint about these little balls. They kept falling apart. They kept breaking apart. But I still liked the toy, though, anyway. And then Legos, and then the Nerf ball. Tell you, man, I love that Christmas. Look at me and Arnold. Like, there's more things that we used to do in the 70s. This is, I think, either 1980 or late 70s, and we used to just, like, to play around. We used to just play around, and Arnold, like, we used to do a lot of the games like Dogpile. We used to do Dogpile. Remember those? We did a lot of things like this in the 70s. Well, apparently, you know, that's all we had to do. That's all we were able to do. I mean, that's all that was available to do, you know. We just interacted with each other most of the time. This was my birthday in Guadalajara. I was 11 years old then. This is Hector Noe, who stars in some of those videos. And I don't know who this guy is. And this guy's name is Rudy. And this guy's name is Robert. They were like big hangouts in our days. More like interacting and playing board games. We did a lot of that, and this was probably 78, 79. And then more of like togethers. But if we weren't in the house, we would be either in parks or everybody would be interacting with people outside. You know, this is a day like just after we came from a park or something, or I think it was just a day that we would all get together and just enjoy ourselves, like we used to have a lot of family gatherings, and we did a lot of this, my mom would cook us all this stuff, and the beans. I love those beans anyway. I remember those plates. That's funny, man. Remember these kind of funky colored stuff around the house, and then this type of table, remember those? And then these funky colored pots and pans. Yeah. I do remember I was enjoying my life back in my day. Like I was like what, 9 years old back. I was just straight out enjoying my life back then, because we did a lot of games, we did a lot of hanging out with each other. More of it, Connect Four. Look at the TV we used to have. That TV. Well, my dad back in the day, around 1976, we had that TV in 1976. My dad bought it for like $1,000 in 1976, or one of those years. Yeah, I think it was 1976. Apparently, we had it up until that time, 1980, until we moved out of the house in 1981. We had it. But for $1,000, my dad bought that TV for $1,000. But, imagine in 1976, $1,000 is equivalent to like almost $3,000 in today's money. But anyways, remember these carpets, remember these couches, remember these funky colored, well, this is what we had in the 70s, So, I mean, it was common to see that in houses in the 70s, and these funky colored couches, like the kind of things that you could drop a pizza on and you won't notice. More park videos, or more park hangouts. And then me and my MP3 player right there. My MP3 player. So this was like the start of my cassette collection, I only had like 9 cassettes at the time. I was 10 years old at the time. And then the funky colored carpet again, and the funky colored couch. And then, okay, this is 1982. Hector, I mean, that's when you had our Atari. And, that's when, like, electronics are sort of starting to take over. Because, well, in 1982, we had the Atari, and I tell you, man, it was like an overjoy to have the Atari. But I was actually more overjoyed watching Hector having a lot of fun with the games, than for me to actually play them myself. But tell you, Atari was kind of like the big thing back then, it was big. Atari was a big thing back in the 80s, in the early 80s, I tell you. So this was Christmas 1981. This is Christmas 1981. I was 11 years old. This was Hector, of course, you probably already know. Cynthia and Arnold. Me, I was 11 years old at the time. And I had wished for a tape recorder. I wanted a radio cassette recorder for Christmas. And you see that box right there? It was my tape recorder that I was about to open up. And I'll show you my tape recorder, the one I'm talking about. It's exactly the one. This is exactly the tape recorder that I got that was in that little box. And I tell you, man, the grin on my face, I was needing plastic surgery to remove that grin out of my face, man. I was just like so happy to receive this. And then during this time, we still did a lot of parks. And then my friend, hang on. So I guess that was the last of these. So that's kind of like the basics of the 80s, And then, well, there's going on to like the 70s. This is more like the 70s now. So the more parks, we still did a lot of parks. See, that was my mom and my dad, and that big TV that we paid $1,000 for. And I remember this, said that was my mom and my dad, somewhere around 1978 or something, 1977 or something like that, It was one of those years. And then this is us. This was us, the whole family, in that 3102 South Townsend Street house. And there's Arnold, me, Hector, my mom, and my dad. My dad is still around, by the way. I mean, my dad is still, I haven't seen him lately, you know, but there's my dad and my mom hanging out in the backyard. We still did a lot of, like, games, like when we had family gatherings. We used to have a lot of family gatherings back then, back in the day. Gee, I tell you, man. So, my dad and me, I was like mad at my dad because, you know, I mean, I don't know, you know how we are sometimes. That's me and my dad. And then my mom, and then the funky colored couch again. I remember this couch, man, I tell you. Crazy colored couch. But I mean, it was the style. It was the style back then, you know. I mean, in the 70s, that's 70s right there. I mean, that was the style, you know. It was the style back in the day. So my mom in this picture was probably about, how old was she? She was like in her 20s at the time, you know, my mom. If I can, yeah, my mom was like 27 in this picture here. I mean, I remember when, yeah, my mom was just only 27, and my dad in this picture here, in this picture, I think my dad was in his 40s or maybe early 40s, maybe. I think, well, if he was born, if this was 1980, and he was, yeah, I think he was 43 or something like that. My mom was, in this picture, was like 27. So more pictures. I mean, this was my aunt and uncle, I guess, and my mom. I remember that porch of the house. That was a nice place. I loved our house, man. Shit, I don't know why. I got really mad at my dad for wanting to sell the house. I really loved that house. I loved it there, man. We lived there for 6 years, and man, I tell you, I loved that house. I mean, I got really mad at my dad for wanting to sell that house, you know, because this was, like I say, this is 3102 South Townsend Street in Santa Ana. Cynthia. This was like 1981 or something like that. Well, that was at my uncle's house. My dad did a lot of newspapers. This is what my dad did a lot of back then. This was our what do you call it? Our phones back then. That's another thing. My dad did a lot of newspapers back then, you know. And that was me at a field trip. This was a field trip at a beach. And this was Hector, and then this was our San Franciscan trip. So, well, this is us, Arnold, me, and Hector, and my dad. This was us at the beach. I think in Tijuana or something like that. This was more of us at the San Francisco, and this was our cousin. We haven't seen him since, or at least I don't. My dad and my mom, this was like in the middle 70s. My dad, you know, built a bar area in the house. He made a little addition in that house, and he built a bar area, and he hung up this little light. I really liked this light, too, you know. I was really fascinated by this light here, you know. I mean, as a kid, I mean, this was in the middle 70s, or even early 70s. I think it might have been early 70s, you know. Shit, my mom and my dad. And, well, we did, I think in the 70s, we had more family hangouts, family gatherings in the 70s than we did in the 80s. But as you could see it, that as the years progressed, we had less and less family gatherings, apparently. But we still had family gatherings. But the generations, like our generation, when we became adults and everything, I mean, it's changed a little. This is Hector and me in my underwear. At the beach, well, to wear underwear at the beach, it was kind of like nothing. It was norm. Back in the 70s, it was norm to see someone wearing just plain underwear at the beach. But I mean, today you would look kind of funny doing that. You don't want to wear just straight out underwear today because it'll look funny. It'll look kind of weird to like doing that. So this was just to hang out at a little pool area somewhere in Tijuana, I think it was. Now these pictures are even more primitive, I mean, I was not even born in some of these. Or I think, I probably wasn't even. I think that's my dad, and that was Hector, I believe. Well, I don't know who these guys are. This is even more primitive. Yeah, you could see that, 1967. I wasn't even born in some of these pictures. See, look at the houses in the 1960s. That's even more primitive than my stuff. Yeah. My grandma. I'm not sure who they are, but well, I'm gonna look at some other. Okay, these are albums that we had. We had these albums when I was a kid in the 70s. So I drew this. Then I mean, this was that's what's SeaWorld? Yeah, SeaWorld, right? And I think this was Hector. I mean, I thought it was me, but it's not. It was Hector because Hector actually had curly hair. For some odd reason, he had curly hair when he was little. Like these are like early 70s and late 60s, or mid 70s. This is the San Franciscan trip. Yeah. Well, more park. We did this in the 70s too. We hung out at parks. We did a lot of parks back then. And this is like a day that I'm talking about. Family gatherings, in the 70s. This is what we did in the 70s. Well, I was a little kid back then. I was only like 5 years old back then, but it's what we did, But and for us kids, we used to do more games. More games, Yeah. More, I mean, this was me playing with my toys in the early 70s. And, yeah. This is me. I know, that's Hector, not me. Because Hector oddly had curly hair for some reason. At our baptism thing, This was actually a picture inside a restaurant, like Jack in the Box, I guess it was. I mean, I guess we did a little bit of like adventurous trips in the 70s. A little bit. We didn't do a lot, though. We didn't do too much of it back then. So, speaking of which, this is me watching TV in the early 70s. I was probably watching Batman at the time. I loved Batman, See, this is us playing our little games in the 70s. And then more hanging out in the backyard. But this was the house in Santa Ana, though. Like back in the early 70s, we lived in this house on the street by the name of Nakoma Drive in Santa Ana back then. And this was our swing set. And look at this. I mean, I was dressed up. This is one of my, I don't know if this was Hector. I think this was Hector, not me. But that was a costume for Halloween then. So this is Arnold. This is like my birthday. I think I was probably like maybe 5 years old, 4 or 5 or something like that. That was my birthday there at the time. No, what did it say? I cannot really read it. I cannot see the candles. Let's see. How many candles? I think I was probably either 4 or 5. This was me and Arnold. We used to play outside. Me and Arnold used to do a lot of that back in our day, And then look at the big wheels. We had our big wheels. See, this I'm talking about like what we used to do in the life of the 70s, So this was our backyard of that 3102 South Townsend Street. And for me, this is me, more parks, park hangouts, and this is me with the toy, the girder and panel building set. And I wrote my name, me on the swing. So basically, that's how things looked, you know. So I could tell you, you know, like in the 70s, what things looked like in the 70s and the 80s, you know, like all I could say is that we did a lot of interacting with everybody. I mean, that's all that was really available to do back in the day, you know. So that's what we did a lot of back then, you know. So anyway, so that's what this video is talking about, as requested by Jose Luis Flores. Very good. So I hope you guys liked this video. So I guess I'm gonna get ready to go, I would say, and until the next time. All right.